All right, so on something more serious here for a couple of questions.
Yeah,
Other than climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, what's
yeah.
the most thrilling thing you've ever done, and what did you learn from that experience?
What's the most what thing?
The most thrilling thing you've ever done.
Thrilling. Okay. Ooh, that's a great question. Um, hmm. Kilimanjaro was definitely up there, but it was more a journey, right? Uh, it was 6 days up, 1 day down, and there was definitely thrill involved in different portions of it. But that whole thing was just a very exciting journey. Um, I think beyond that, two things I guess I could say. One is I've gone skydiving 3 times now. And what that has taught me is to be present in the moment.
You are listening to Stories from Real Life, a podcast by engaging storytellers for engaged story listeners. Here's your host, author and journalist, Melvin E. Edwards.
Hello again, and welcome to this December 24th edition of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Thanks for joining me on today's storytelling journey. Our guest this week is Dr. Shezad Batliwali. Hello, Dr. Shez. Hopefully I didn't mess up your pronunciation of your name too badly.
You got it perfect. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, nice. Does your name mean anything special in your family or your culture?
Yeah, actually, my name means prince. Not just prince, though, Shehzad. It means prince. It means little prince.
Little prince, okay.
Which is, as someone who is only 5'7", I took offense to that. I was like, man, I would have settled for Fresh Prince, Short King, but Little Prince, come on, man.
That's funny.
The worst of both worlds, but anyway, that's what that means.
Dr. Shez sounds cool, though.
Yeah, see, thank you. That's what I was going for. I was going for cool.
All right, so you're an eye surgeon who grew up in East Texas.
Correct.
And you're also a weekend comedian. So tell me, what's so funny about eyes?
It's not so much eyeballs. It's not eyesight. It's insight that's funny, right? Or lack thereof. I had really no insight into my journey and kind of why I was doing the things that I was doing, right? Like, why did I choose medicine? And why did I decide that space was such a fascination for me? And why did I get into business so early on in my life? I didn't really think about the things that I was doing in my life. I was just doing them, right? So when I finally started to have some awareness and have some insight, I realized there was a lot of humor in my story. And part of my mission in life now is to help others see clearly, right? Not just the beauty of our external world, but also, their own journey through life, right? And helping others understand and realize why we do what we do. Once we understand the why, life is just much more fun and enjoyable.
So what about your fellow eye surgeons? Are any of them funny?
Actually, there is one. His name is Dr. Will Flannery. If you ever heard of Glaucomflecken, he's actually a very prominent name in medicine and humor. I'm nowhere near his caliber or his popularity, but I think he's the only ophthalmologist, the only other one I know that's into comedy.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So there's a movie called Patch Adams about a doctor who's also a comedian.
Yes.
He uses humor as a part of his medical practice.
Yes.
So I've got a new nickname for you based on that character.
Please.
Let's see what you think about this. How about I Patch Adams?
Dude, I love that. That is my new screen name. Yes, I love that.
That's
so
awesome.
Funny. So funny.
All right, so my podcast last week was about a family from South Africa. and immigrated to the United States and how much of an ordeal that was for them. So,
Yeah.
can you tell me about your family's ordeal or your family's journey from India to the United States and how accepted you felt after getting here as an undocumented immigrant?
Yeah, I mean there's an oxymoron, right? It's hard to fit in as an immigrant in general. By definition, you're new, right? You're new in this environment and you're just trying to fit in and you're trying to survive. And that was true for my family. We came with uh, really, nothing. And my dad kind of built, everything that he's been able to do brick by brick, right? I mean, after a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And so life's really difficult as an immigrant as it is. But when you throw being undocumented on top of all of that, right? My dad was busy working multiple jobs um, there was just really no guidance or no clear path on what is it that you have to do to become a legal immigrant, right? A green card holder or a U.S. citizen of the country. And when that guidance isn't there and you're busy surviving, it just kind of falls by the wayside, right? And in retrospect, that's like the first thing you should work on as an immigrant is to figure out how to do it legally and immigrate. But I like to say that we came on a tourist visa and we just never stopped touring, because I mean, have you seen the size of this country? It's I mean, I say that jokingly, but yeah. So growing up undocumented after we lost our status on our tourist visas was really hard, and I personally felt like I never quite belonged. And so for a huge part of my life, everything I did was to try to belong, was to try to fit in. Um, and we can talk, more about how I went about doing that. But I think that's a fundamental human need, right? Is to belong. We all want belonging and connection, safety and security. Right? All of these things are very common human needs and emotions, and they're just magnified because the lack of those as an immigrant, especially as an undocumented immigrant, is just so profound.
So, what did Presidential Proclamation 10014 in 20? How did that impact your family?
Yeah, good question. So that proclamation essentially said that if you are applying for a green card through the vehicle of your children, right? So if you are the parent of a U.S. citizen, then there's essentially a hold, a temporary hold on processing those visa petitions. And it was created by President Trump. It was in the name of the pandemic, right? Kind of in the wake of the pandemic, to basically, like, I guess, shut down our borders temporarily to prevent, people that may be carrying the virus from coming into the country. But it quickly became this like political game that was being played, because there was a period of time that it was going to last and then it was going to expire once the pandemic and things like that became under control. But it kept renewing, it kept renewing, it kept renewing. And so my dad had left the US to go to India to get his green card based on that petition. That happened in February of 2020. He got the interview call to go to India. And as soon as he landed, literally like while he was in the air is when the pandemic essentially blew up. And so as soon as he lands, he's at the airport, he called me. He's like, "Hey, everyone's got masks on. What's going on?" I was like, "I don't know, something about a virus, who knows, probably nothing." Well, he goes to the U.S. consulate to interview for the visa petition to get his green card. And right before they processed the visa so that he could get his green card, all of the U.S. consulates shut down all across the world. And that was March 16th of 2020. I'll never forget that date. It's like burned in my memory. When this happened, I mean, my understanding was he was going to be gone for about 4 weeks max. You got to understand, my entire life, we had been this was the fight of my life, right? Is to figure out a way to get a green card so that my family could be together. Again, belonging, right? And connection. And so this was a threat to my family. And so I was doing everything in my power to prevent him from leaving the country. And if he had to leave the country, to make that time period as short as possible. So we had applied for a bunch of paperwork and all of these waivers. I mean, it's a very involved process. We had all of that stacked. And because we had all of that and we had prepared in advance, our lawyers had said that we had a very good chance of just going to India, going to the consulate, getting the green card, coming right back in 4 weeks. Well, then the world shuts down. So 4 weeks becomes 18 months.
Wow.
And yeah, and Presidential Proclamation 10014 definitely didn't help the situation. That was the one thing, actually, once the U.S. consulates opened up, right, and they started processing the visas again, like 4 or 6 months later, that proclamation prevented my dad's visa application from being processed, and it kept renewing. And that really didn't change until the next administration came, and President Biden essentially revoked that proclamation through his own version of a proclamation. So yeah, that was probably one of the toughest time periods of my life.
Oh, glad you made it through that. That sounds really challenging.
You too. You too.
So I know that you're very involved in politics, but this question is not about policy. It's more personal.
Yeah.
So being of Indian descent, did you feel any sense of pride that an Indian descendant was the Democratic Party's presidential nominee this year?
Yeah, actually, I very much did, right? Because, that means that the White House is going to be smelling like my mom's house, I'm just kidding. I couldn't resist. No. So look, America is about diversity, right? That is the fabric of this country, is that when we come together from different walks of life, we can contribute to our very unique problems in very unique ways because we all have different perspectives. And so to have someone from Indian descent be a part of the highest ticket in the land, right? To have a shot at becoming president. I mean, you can't help but feel pride, both for your country of origin, because, it tells you that our perspective matters, but also for the country that's home now, because it tells me that I'm accepted, right? My origin story and where I come from, I'm accepted with open arms in this country that I call home. So absolutely.
That's great. All right, so you've done a lot of things in your life, including completing a NASA internship in space medicine.
Correct.
So now I'm wondering, do astronauts have a sense of humor, or are they all sciencey all the time?
It's funny you say that. Yeah, I mean, honestly, you're right. It is. It's very, it's definitely a very science-driven environment, right? Astronauts are doing research on the space station. The International Space Station is basically a giant laboratory, and you're doing research in all different kinds of sciences. And going to space really isn't a laughing matter, right? I mean, I used to stalk astronauts. I mean, I would go to space medicine conferences and all these different, conferences, and I would be hovering around them, trying to just, be a fly on the wall and learn everything I could from these people that I honestly put on a pedestal, right? An astronaut in my mind represented the best of humanity, right? And so how do these people think? How do these people function? I was very fascinated by that. And I even applied to become an astronaut as recently as this year. So what it takes to get in, it's a lot, but one of the things it takes to get in, at least from what I understand, is you have to be a trustworthy person. because your life depends on your colleague, right? When I was a NASA intern, I got to live with Chris Cassidy, who's a Navy SEAL who then became a NASA astronaut because Navy SEAL wasn't enough, and so he decided he was to become an astronaut, right? And I got to live with this person for 2 months and get to pick his brain about all kinds of things. And one of the things that he told me was a story about how he was doing a spacewalk with another astronaut from Italy named Luca Parmitano, right? Luca and him were outside doing a spacewalk, and Luca's helmet started filling up with water, and he essentially in real time started to kind of drown in water. There was some leakage in the spacesuit. Chris Cassidy noticed that, saw that his colleague was in distress, and just, I mean, like the smoothest operator in the world, took him back into the airlock and saved his life, basically, right? So you are dealing with life and death up in space. And so it's not a laughing matter at all. But on the flip side, one of the ways I cope through life's struggles is through humor. I hope if NASA listens to this podcast that they accept me, because I will be the comedian on board. I will lighten it up for all of them. So that's a little shameless plug for me. But anyway, what was your original question? Are they funny? I don't know, probably. But
so we'll just leave it at that. So
yeah,
you said What do you mean when you say that you live by a cosmic perspective?
Yeah. I try to, right? I'm human, just like everybody else. And so I definitely have my moments where I fall short of that line of thinking. But essentially what that means is, like, none of this stuff really matters that much if you think about it, right? Sometimes we think we're so important, right? I definitely have been in that boat. I think it takes a certain level of ego to do stand-up comedy, right? To be a surgeon. And I definitely have that. And a huge part of my life has been to come to terms with that ego, right? Ego can be good and bad. And so to realize that my ego has been protective my whole life, but there's a certain level of humility that you, I think, just should cultivate in life in order to live a fulfilling life. The cosmic perspective helps me cultivate that humility, because at the end of the day, I may think I'm so important, right? And get so stressed and anxious about the things that happen to me. But at the end of the day, I'm one person out of 7 billion on this planet, out of millions of planetary bodies in our solar system, out of millions and billions of solar systems in our galaxy, out of billions and trillions of galaxies in our universe. So if you zoom out enough, which the cosmic perspective lets you do, then you realize how impermanent life really is. And when you think that way, at least for me, there's a level of humility that comes with, right? There's a level of humility that sort of comes with that line of thinking. So that's what the cosmic perspective is for me. If I'm stressed about something, or I'm getting in my head about something, or I'm angry at something, or I'm dealing with anxiety, which again, I deal with all of those emotions. I try to go back to that perspective, right? What am I really upset about? Does any of this really matter? How important do I really think I am? The grand scheme of things.
Okay. So that sounds like a TED Talk right there. But my question is, what is it like giving a real TED Talk?
Yeah, that was terrifying, man. That was probably one of the hardest things I've done, right? Because again, like there's a part of me that's confident in who I am, and now, starting to feel comfortable in my own skin. But when you talk about going up on stage and speaking to hundreds of people, and then talking about a message that you think is worth sharing, that is going to be beneficial for all of humanity, that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. And I certainly felt that pressure when I was on stage. But again, cosmic perspective, right? Right before I went on stage, I tried to channel that line of thinking, and come to terms with the duality of, like, yes, this is a very important thing, and I've spent a lot of time and energy getting to this point. I'm going to deliver this talk, but who is it for, and what's it about? Is it about me? Am I making this about me again? Or is it for a higher purpose? Is it for others? Is it to serve? Right. So kind of shifting mindsets and kind of reframing that, I think, helped a long way. But it was still a very terrifying thing. I'm glad it went well, and should be coming out in a few months. So I'll definitely be sure to send you a link on that.
I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Yeah. I think it'll be good.
So when did you decide what you wanted to do as a career? Or have you decided yet?
Right. Yeah. Well, there's career and there's purpose. For me, I guess there's a difference in how I think about those. Traditionally speaking, I don't really remember ever sort of consciously making the decision that, what do I want to do? Well, I think I'm going to be a doctor. It was always just, I want to be a doctor, right? You know how you like learn a new language, or you speak a language, right? Like your native language, but you don't really remember learning it. You just kind of, are conscious of just speaking it. So it was kind of like that for me when it came to medicine. I think part of it was just this expectation my parents had. And part of it was just, I'm a very curious person by nature, and I'm very fascinated by the human body and the human mind. I always have been. So that, combined with sort of the expectation that my parents had, I think it was a very natural thing for me to say that I'm going to be a physician. And then in choosing ophthalmology, that came later on. But at my core, that's who I am. I'm a compassionate, empathetic healer, and I help people see clearly, whether it's through ophthalmology or just through what's in their heart. That's really who I am at my core. Beyond that, I think from a purpose-driven standpoint, it's so interesting to me. Like, I have no question, no doubt that there's a higher power, because it is, it didn't just happen by chance that I became an ophthalmologist, right? I never had insight into my own psyche, and now I help people see. And going through that process of becoming the person that helps people see as an ophthalmologist, I gained insight into my own psyche. And now the purpose of my life has become to help others see their own truth, if you will. So there's this metaphor that my life is starting to take shape into, right, of helping others see truth and light through my own truth. And I'm still discovering what that is. So, I think for me, that's probably a much higher calling and purpose. And I don't know what that really is going to look like in my life. I'm 34 years old, and I'm still evolving, right? So it might be to continue to do what I'm doing in ophthalmology. It might be motivational speaking with humor, which is what this next evolution of my life is starting to take shape. It may be through something in space, or something completely different that is yet to be discovered. I'm totally open to any and all of those possibilities.
Wow. So what have each one of your accomplishments taught you so far?
Man, That's a heavy question there. Um, to continue to learn, right? To continue to learn. I've done a lot of great things, but I've also, in each one of those accomplishments that now look really good on paper, I also failed through a lot of them, right? I made mistakes. And the one thing that I am proud of, honestly, for myself is that I didn't give up, and I kind of persevered through the failures and the mistakes, right? Because I never stopped learning. So I think that's the biggest lesson of them all. It doesn't matter what I end up doing in my life or what experiences come my way. Everything is a lesson, even the failures, even the struggles, right? They're more than a lesson. I'm starting to think in this way now, that they're a gift, actually, right? Even your struggles. So, yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing that I've learned through every single one of them is to appreciate the gifts that they are and to learn from them.
That's great. So let's talk about your comedy for just a moment. So how
Yeah.
and why did you get into stand-up comedy? And then the second part of the question is, do you tell jokes on stage or do you tell humorous stories while you're up there?
Yeah, that's a great question. It started off as jokes, right? Um, at my core, I'm a fun-loving person, and I love to tell stories. That's who I am at my core. And I feel, for whatever reason, because of the things that I've gone through, or what have you, I don't know exactly why, but I I think I do a good job of being vulnerable and being relatable, right? I enjoy experiencing the full range of human emotions, and processing them, and just kind of understanding, um, why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. And what I've realized over the years is that other people feel the same things. It's just we don't like to talk about those feelings because we're afraid of judgment. So humor then becomes a really important tool to kind of diffuse that tension a little bit, right? And talk about the things that are hard to talk about. Because guess what? We all feel the same feelings. We're all human at the end of the day, fundamentally, right? That's what space has taught me, is that we all belong and we're all humans at the end of the day. So comedy for me is a way to have the hard conversations and to be able to relate to people in things that are uncomfortable through humor. And I also really like attention. So it just fits. It totally fits, right? I'm a fun loving person, and I kind of like to be the center of attention. And, so that's the why behind the comedy. And the way I discovered that is through therapy, right? I kind of lost touch with who I was in terms of this fun loving person at my core. Part of it is just the culture of medical training in this country, and I think beyond this country, just worldwide. Part of it is my upbringing. So I lost that touch with that part of me, and I was very burnt out and just not enjoying life. So once I got into therapy, and from there I discovered coaching and just all of these different tools that are available to help um, correct your mindset. I realized that there was actually a lot of humor in our life, and I'm not special in that way. There's humor in your life too, I'm sure. It just takes some reflection, some introspection to discover it. So once I realized that, um, it was just a very natural extension for me to like get into comedy because I started to remember who I was at my core. And when I was in grade school, I was that center of attention, class clown type of guy. I would just make people laugh at my expense. And I enjoyed that because I don't know, I just felt like, people connect through that. So that actually is honestly one of the purposes of my life is to bring joy to others' lives through laughter. That really is a purpose of my life. I really believe that. So that's the why of comedy. And then the other part of your question was the jokes, and yeah. So initially, then I was like, okay, I want to do stand up comedy. Well, how do I do stand up comedy? How does one become a stand up comedian? That's another thing about me is I really do believe that we can learn anything. Human beings are very smart. We have a very powerful intellect. All it takes is the willingness to learn, and then a really good teacher to teach you. So I started taking classes in stand-up comedy at my local comedy club in Dallas, and I went into it, thinking that I'm some hotshot person, and like I cut on eyeballs for a living. Like, come on, like how hard is comedy gonna be? I can do this. Well, it was very hard. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, and my arrogance and ego was shot down real quick after I bombed a couple of times on stage. Being on stage and trying to make people laugh is about as naked as you can feel with your clothes on.
Wow.
Right? It's a very vulnerable feeling. And once I started bombing a few times, I was like, okay, clearly, like I don't have this figured out as well as I think I do. So what exactly does it take to become a good comedian? I got a comedy coach, and I started to learn that there are tactics, right? So much of comedy is human psychology. Like you and I could say the same jokes, but if our timing is off just a little bit, they'll hit differently. So much of it is about psychology. It's actually, comedy is an art form that is actually very related to magic and like mentalism, right? If you ever see a magician or a mentalist perform on stage, that's what they're doing. It's sort of understanding human psychology and manipulating that on stage, taking the audience through a roller coaster of emotions. And that's what comedy is. So I started to learn some tactics on how I can take my life story and reframe it and rephrase it in a way that would actually induce humor. So I started doing some of that. That started to hit well. And then I was like, okay, well, but this is good, but these are kind of like one-off jokes and things like that. I actually, I'm not just doing comedy just to do comedy. Like there's a bigger purpose here. I want to have hard conversations through humor. So how do you do that? Well, a conversation is a story of what? Of me, obviously, because I like to be the center of attention. So it's my story. So then I took aspects of my story and kind of started to put pieces together. So I have probably a good 15, maybe 20 minutes of material. That is, part of it is my immigrant origin story. Part of it is, I joke about my name a lot. It's funny, you started this conversation with my name. And part of it is my experience in space. And part of it is my upbringing. So I've got about like 5 minutes or so in each of those compartments for a total of 18 to 20 minutes of material. And you may think that that's not a lot, but I mean, it's taken me 2 years to come up with that, right? That's the other thing about comedy is like, I mean, it takes a lot. Like I have so much respect for these people that have these like hour-long Netflix specials, right? Like Hassan Minaj and Trevor Noah and all these people, and then they do it again and again. It is actually extremely difficult to come up with good quality material that's an hour long. So anyway, that was a very long-winded answer to hopefully all parts of your question.
It definitely answered it. So what kind of things make you laugh?
Couple of things. One is just kind of goofiness, right? I just like goofiness, and just when people are themselves, I really enjoy that, right? It may not like induce humor, but it's just fun. It's just fun to be around people that are very comfortable in their own skin. And then the other part of it is I love wittiness, and I think I'm not special in that way, right? I mean, so many people like witty humor. I mean, that's some people resonate with kind of dad jokes and like cringe type of humor. Some people resonate with, crowd working, and just watching that interaction, right, between the comedian and the audience member. Some people resonate with wittiness and, oh, that's so clever. That is so clever. I like that. That makes me laugh. So I think for me, it's probably like clever humor, which I'm still learning how to do. Just because I like it doesn't mean I'm good at it, right? So clever humor and just goofiness and silliness and being yourself on stage.
So Eye Patch Adams was a bullseye then. That's what you're saying.
That's why I thought it was so funny. I was like, oh, that is so clever, right? Like, he's eye patches all the time, and he's also a doctor who does comedy. So it's great, man. You have great comedic insight. I love it.
I appreciate that. Now I just got to get my kids to laugh at my dad jokes. Although my oldest daughter, who's actually your age, she loves my jokes. My other kids, not so much.
Man, everyone's got a different taste.
Absolutely. All right, so on something more serious here for a couple of questions. Other than climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, what's the most thrilling thing you've ever done, and what did you learn from that experience?
What's the most what thing?
The most thrilling thing you've ever
done. Okay. Ooh, that's a great question. Kilimanjaro was definitely up there, but it was more a journey, right? It was 6 days up, 1 day down, and there was definitely thrill involved in different portions of it. But that whole thing was just a very exciting journey. I think beyond that, two things I guess I could say. One is I've gone skydiving 3 times now. And what that has taught me is to be present in the moment. And that sounds a little weird, but let me see if I can unpack that. Like, I remember, feeling, right, like just really excited and all of that when I was going skydiving. But the memory that's like ingrained in my mind on all 3 of those dives is that moment right before I'm about to jump. The plane door opens, right, and you're kind of inching forward, and you put your feet on the platform right before you're about to jump, and you're just taking it all in. The wind, the cold, the view, right? The view. Just you feel kind of one with nature. And that feeling of just being present and taking it all in, letting all of your senses feel alive. That's the thing that I remember the most out of all 3 of those dives. So I've never really thought about this. No one's really asked me this question, but in thinking about it, I think that's probably why it has stuck in my mind, right? So much. That, and then I would say probably along the same line of thinking, being on stage just in general. And yeah, like that first moment when you walk out on stage, and I just take a moment always, and I've started to do this even more. I take a moment when I first get on stage. Like I did this 2 weeks ago. It was my biggest event. It was over 240 people, and I was doing stand-up comedy for them for like 10 minutes. And I went on stage, and everyone's clapping. It's an introduction, and I just like stood there and just took it all in again. Right? Just being present in that moment. I pulled out my phone and I took a selfie with the audience in that moment. That was thrilling. That was thrilling. And same thing right before I was about to jump off the plane. So, yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Great question. It made me think a lot about thrill and being present and how that's related. That's a good question.
Oh, here's another deep question for you. We only have a couple questions left.
Yeah.
In preparing for this interview today, this podcast episode, I watched some of your YouTube videos and listened to some of your podcast episodes. And you talk a lot about the power of self-awareness.
Yes.
So after all the things you've done in your life and the things that you still hope to do, how would you describe Dr. Shez to 7-year-old Shehzad Yusuf Batliwali?
Gosh, that's such a good question, man. This question might make me cry. How would I describe Dr. Shez to a young 7-year-old Shezad Yusuf Batliwala? He's like you, just a little wiser. That's it. Right? We go through periods of life and we tend to lose us. I'll speak for myself. This was true for me. I lost who I was, right? If we can just remember who we are at our core, a fun, loving, joyful, resilient person. Yes, I do things. What I do in terms of I'm an ophthalmologist and I'm an entrepreneur and I'm an advocate. I am all of these things. These are things that I do. But at my core, I'm always, no matter what I get myself into, always going to be a resilient, fun-loving, joyful person full of grit. That's who 7-year-old me was. And that's who I am today. Now, I've had experiences over the last, 20 something years that have taught me lessons, and I've gained wisdom from those experiences. But that doesn't change who I am at my core. So if I could impart that on my 7-year-old self, to never forget who you are at your core. Be open to life's experiences, learn from them, acquire wisdom, but don't lose sight of who you are, because that's the magic of life, right? That is what, in my opinion, who you are at your core is your gift to others and in the name of service. Like, you can have the most profound impact in the world if you just remember who you are at your core. That's what I would say.
That's great. All right, as a final question today, what is your message to the listeners out there? What do you want to leave them with that will be memorable?
Take the time to pause. Take the time to pause and be present. And, I bet you the things that we're chasing, if we just took the time to pause and truly reflect, we would find that we're already living the things that we're chasing. We already have the things that we're chasing. That was true for my life for such a long period of my life. I would always either be focused on the future or I would think about the past. I would never really be in my present moment. And you can lose sight of life when that happens. So that would be my biggest piece of advice, not only to your audience, but to me, because I still struggle with this on a daily basis, right? And that's probably the other thing I would like to impart. If I could impart two things on your audience, you'll never figure it out, right? That's not the point. The point is not to figure it out. The point is to be present and enjoy the lessons that life is giving you as you're being present, and trust and have faith that you will figure it out as things evolve.
Good lessons there.
Yes, sir.
So our guest today has been the most interesting man in the world. That's what I'm calling you today, Shezad Batluwali.
You
Dr.
got another
Shez.
guest coming, or you talking about me?
Now I'm talking about you. So, Dr. Shez, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been my pleasure to have you here.
It's been awesome. Thank you. You ask really good questions. I think everyone has a gift. Your gift is to ask questions that really make people think. So keep doing what you're doing, man. Pleasure being here.
I appreciate that. I've worked on that over the years, so it's been honed sort of like the stories that you tell on stage. It's a lifelong craft.
Absolutely.
So, thank you. So this will be our last episode of 2024. I want to wish everyone out there Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Our third season launches on January 7th with new guests and stories. But there will be a short bonus episode that will drop at midnight on January 1st. It'll be a special message from Asia, so don't miss that one.
Hey.
So if you start to miss us during the holidays, you can go back and listen to previous episodes on Spotify that you may have missed or just want to hear again. That's it for this episode of Stories from Real Life. Join us again next time for another great storytelling journey. Until then, don't forget to shine your light wherever you go.